What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and there's been a lot of talk the last few days about the ACC possibly blowing up. No more ACC, or several teams maybe leaving the conference. This really is, it all comes down to their TV deal, which is absolutely terrible. You've got UCF now making more money than Florida State and Miami, and some of these top programs are just not happy, and they're looking for a way out. I don't know what's going to happen, but in this video, it's going to be like a two-part video. First off, we'll look at what I think is going to happen in real life, and then I'll also just do this for the video game and how I would realign the conferences if we got rid of the ACC. So really a two-part video here, and we'll start with what I think is going to happen in real life. And I did this for the Pac-12 as well, so if you missed that video, you can go back and check it out. I talked about what I think is going to really happen to the Pac-12, and then we put it together here on the video game. So what's going to happen? I think most people expect Florida State, Clemson, Georgia Tech, Miami, those teams in the Southeast to join the SEC. I don't think that's going to happen, though, based off of information that I've gotten from sources, from research. I actually believe there's more mutual interest in the Big Ten for some of those teams. And so what I think is actually going to happen is I think Clemson, Florida State, and Miami are all going to go to the Big Ten. I think all three of those teams will go to the Big Ten. I also think they're going to wind up adding Oregon and Washington. And then to make it even, they probably add another team here. Maybe it's Pittsburgh, but I don't know. Penn State might not want Pittsburgh in the Big Ten. Maybe they do. I think that would be great to have that matchup every year in the conference. But I think probably what winds up happening is they get Duke just because of the academics, because of basketball. I think there will be a lot of interest in Duke going to the Big Ten. So I think they're going to add Clemson, Duke, Florida State, and then Miami. I think those teams will go to the Big Ten. I know a lot of people talk about academics and how it could never happen, but there have been things in place to where these teams are kind of preparing for potentially going to the Big Ten. So I think those four teams would go to the Big Ten. I think the SEC, and this is something else I've heard, is actually going to go after North Carolina, NC State, Virginia, and Virginia Tech, because they want to expand their footprint. They've already got teams in Florida and in South Carolina and in Georgia. They want to move into North Carolina and Virginia, and so I do believe that's what is going to happen. The SEC will grab those four teams, and so you'll have four teams going to the Big Ten, four teams going to the SEC. That would then leave 8 teams. So we're talking about Boston College, Georgia Tech, Louisville, also talking about Syracuse, Pittsburgh, unless, again, the Big Ten takes Pitt instead of Duke. But I think they're probably going to take Duke. And then also Wake Forest. And so these teams that don't go to the SEC or the Big Ten, I think the Big 12 probably comes in and gets those teams. They've already got West Virginia. Now they've got Cincinnati, UCF. They've kind of expanded all over. I do believe those teams wind up in the Big 12. Possibly if the Big 12 if they can't work it out, or if they don't want all these teams, maybe some of them go to the American. But I do think they all wind up in the Big 12. So you're going to have a really big Big 12, a really big SEC, a really big Big 10, Pac-12. If they hang on, I don't know what they're going to do. I don't think they're going to be viewed in the same way. And really the SEC and the Big 10 will be viewed as the power conferences. The SEC would then have 20 teams. The Big 10 would have 22 teams, which is just crazy. I don't want this to happen, but I do think it's going to happen. I mean, if you have 22 teams, what do? Play 10 or 11 conference games? You're going to maybe go 3 or 4 years without playing a team in your own conference. I don't like the way this is headed, but I do think that's what it's going to be. We're going to have the SEC, and we're going to have the Big 10. Those are going to be your power conferences. And then the Big 12 is going to be a respectable conference as well. I don't know what will happen with the Pac-12. And again, I think the ACC, these teams will leave, and then they'll be left with those 6 teams, and maybe they add some to keep it going, or maybe those teams leave as well and go to the Big 12. But if the conference does completely go away, again, I do think that that's what's going to happen. Those teams go to the Big 12. So how about for NCAA football, how we could realign this and what makes the most sense? I've actually gone ahead and I fixed the conferences to what they are today, and I also added the teams to the Big Ten. So I added USC and UCLA to the Big Ten, and then I also added into the SEC Oklahoma and Texas. So there's no room in these two conferences. There's nowhere to go in the Big Ten or the SEC, at least on the game. So what we're going to do is we're going to make some room. So we're going to move Vanderbilt. And again, they don't really care about sports, do they? I mean, I know they get a lot of money from the SEC, but let's say the SEC is going to kick them out. And again, this is for video game purposes only. I don't think this is what's going to happen in real life. So keep that in mind. And then also what I'm going to do is I'm going to move Missouri back to the Big 12. Because look, Missouri just does not belong in the SEC. I think they fit better in the Big 12. So we're going to move them to the Big 12, back to the Big 12. And that'll free up a couple of spots here in the SEC. And then for the Big 10, I think, look at Northwestern. Kind of a similar situation to Vanderbilt. They're never going to be great. I know they've had flashes. They've had good seasons. But really, they just took advantage of a Big 10 West that was down. So Northwestern's going to go out. And then we're going to move Rutgers out as well. I know that the Big 10 would love to have... They love to have that New York market in real life. But again, for the video game, for competitive purposes, I think we can move those teams out. I would love to add Washington and Oregon here, but we're keeping the Pac-12 intact. So we're going to, again, the Pac-12 will stay as a power conference here in this scenario. So that's going to leave 2 spots in the Big 10, 2 spots in the SEC. What's going to make the most sense here? Well, let's go back to the ACC. And I think Clemson and Florida State, again, I don't think this is going to happen in real life, but I think they're the best fit in the SEC. We're going to put Clemson and Florida State in the SEC. And then who's going to go to... Oh, we're going to have to put them in the East, not the West. Who is going to go to the Big 10 in this scenario? Again, only 2 spots. And it's not letting me join. Hold on, we got to go back to the SEC and fix this. Why won't it let me put them in the West? There's a spot right there in the West. Oh, it's the ACC's the problem. So we got to flip them into another division. That was the issue here. So Florida State now goes into the SEC West. And we'll fix those divisions here in just a second. So who does the Big 10 get from these teams? It's tough. It's tough. I don't really know what the best fit is. Is there anyone else we would move out of the Big 10? Indiana, Maryland, Illinois. I would love to make room for maybe some of these teams, but I don't think that it's going to work to take any of these teams out. So what we're going to do is we're going to put Miami, because I think they would be an interesting fit in the Big 10. You're going to get into the state of Florida there. Obviously recruiting, that would be big for recruiting. And so we're going to move them over to the Big 10. And then our other team, just from a competitive standpoint, I think it's North Carolina. North Carolina has been a pretty good team, so we're going to move them over to the Big 10 as well. And then that's going to leave these teams. So now we look at potentially adding some teams to the Big 12. I think it would make a lot of sense to add Pittsburgh. That's a pretty good program. So Pittsburgh going to join the Big 12. And then that's going to, I believe, leave us 2 spots because we put Missouri in the Big 12. Who else should go to the Big 12? Well, let's go back to the ACC. And this is really tough. You look at NC State. They're a pretty good program. Wake Forest has been pretty good. Syracuse, Virginia Tech. Historically, Virginia Tech, obviously, has been a really good fit. Has been a good football program. But I think what we're going to do is we're actually going to get NC State and we're going to get Louisville. So I'm going to move NC State over to the Big 12. And we're going to move Louisville over to the Big 12 as well. So those teams going to go into the Big 12. And then that leaves Boston College, Duke, Georgia Tech, Syracuse, Virginia Tech. So we're going to kind of reunite a few of these teams in the old Big East. So Boston College, Syracuse, Virginia Tech. And we're going to move those teams into the American. But look, we've only got 2 spots in the American, so I think we need to get rid of a few teams out of the American. Let's get rid of Charlotte. I mean, Charlotte is really not a powerhouse in football by any means. They were lucky to get in the American. So we're gonna switch Charlotte. And I think what we're actually going to swap them with Boston College. And then we're going to swap Virginia Tech with Rice. I mean, come on, Rice. Should they really be here? Okay, so then we've got, you know, the rest of these programs, they're respectable. I guess I could leave these teams, these programs in here. And so we go back to the ACC, and I think we want to add Syracuse into the Big, not the Big 12, into the American. And also Virginia. But look, we're still running out of room here in the American. So how are we going to get Duke, Georgia Tech, and Wake Forest into the American Conference? Or would we potentially want to put them somewhere else? And remember, we've also got these teams here. Rutgers, Northwestern, Vanderbilt. I think Rutgers would be a good fit in the American. So the American's going to have to lose some teams. So we have to make some decisions here. I think North Texas is a team we can move out. And we're just going to put them in the independents for now. I think Florida Atlantic is a team we can move out. Although, this conference already has South Florida. So I don't think they really need Florida Atlantic. So we're going to move them into the independents as well. And that'll give us a couple more spots. But we still need some more room here, and I just don't know who else you remove. UTSA has really been, you know, they've been good in the last few years. I hate to get rid of them. So we'll come back over to the ACC, and we'll add Wake Forest, and then we'll add Georgia Tech, and that's still going to leave Duke. And actually, we're going to have to put a team into the ACC because you can't get below 4 teams. So we will put them. We'll add a team there. And we'll go back to the ACC and move Georgia Tech into the American. And then you look at the American, and again, we're full, but we'd like to put Rutgers in here, and we'd like to get Duke in here. So which teams do you remove? That's the big question. And I'm having a hard time with this, but we're going to just say that Navy, they go independent like Army. I mean, there's really no reason for them to be in this conference now. So they're going to go back to being independent. And then you still got to add someone here. Remove someone. We're going to get Duke out of the ACC. And again, we run into that same problem. So for video purposes, we'll put Navy. Or we'll put Florida Atlantic in the ACC. Then we'll go back over to the ACC and add Duke. And we're going to add them to the American. So we're left with, again, with the independents. I think Vanderbilt, Northwestern, they're just going to stay independent. Again, I would like to put Rutgers in the American just because they used to be in the Big East or whatever, but I guess there's just not going to be room for them. And you look at their football program, and I mean, UTSA's been a better program. We don't want to get rid of them. UAB's been a better program. Perhaps we could do Temple, and I guess that's what I'll do. I'll swap. I can't remember if Temple was in the old Big East or not. I feel like they were at one point. But again, you look at these teams. I'm gonna go with Temple. So we're gonna change Temple out for Rutgers. I'm gonna leave Vandy and Northwestern as independents, along with Notre Dame, Navy, Temple, and Army. And these ACC teams, they're just consider them independents as well, because this conference is really not going to mean anything. So now we get back to our conferences, and you look at the different divisions here, and we're going to have to try to make some changes. Really, none of these teams belong in the West. I guess we could trade UAB with Virginia. I mean, some of these teams, it would almost probably make sense to do like a North and a South. And so maybe we'll do that and see if that would make more sense. So let's change these divisions. We're going to change one to a North and a South. And again, we're trying to get rid of the ACC and realign the other conferences in a way that would make sense, at least for the video game, not necessarily what I think would happen in real life. All right, so now we've got the South, the North and the South, and we can make some changes here. Obviously, South Florida should be in the South, and really we could probably leave this just like this. Again, this is not going to be perfect, but I kind of like the way that this came out, because you've got really Georgia Tech's the only old ACC team in the South. The rest of these teams, I guess we could switch East Carolina and Georgia Tech. And again, it's not going to be perfectly realigned, but you get all the ACC teams over here, all the old Power 5 teams, Rutgers in there as well. So I like the way that that divides up. So we're going to use those for use that for the divisions. We'll come back to the Big 12. We've got the East and the West. We'll swap Pittsburgh and Missouri. And I think this will work. Well, no, we need to change NC State. We'll switch them with Baylor. And so I think this would make sense for East and West. You've got the new ACC teams, NC State, Louisville, West Virginia, all there in the East. Pittsburgh, along with West Virginia, UCF, Houston, Cincinnati, Iowa State. I think that works pretty well for our divisions in the Big 12. Then we go to the Big 10, and we probably want to make some changes here. We added Miami, and we added North Carolina. So we can put Purdue back into the West, where they originally were, and there you go. The Big 10 is all set up with an East and a West. And then we'll go to the SEC finally. We want to switch Clemson and Oklahoma. No, Clemson should stay in the East. Actually, we're in pretty good shape here. We would like to get Florida State, though, in the East. So who do we swap them with? That's going to be the question. You have Auburn and Florida. Auburn and Alabama, I should say, the rivals. But actually, that should have been Alabama. But we can make this to where there's a cross-division rivalry with Alabama and Auburn every year. You're going to lose the Tennessee-Alabama rivalry if you do that. But I just don't know what else really makes sense here. So I think this is how we would set up the East and the West. So again, getting rid of the ACC, that's how I would set up the conferences and the divisions to play on NCAA football. Let me know what you would change, maybe what you do different down in the comments below. And thanks for watching.